Pursuant to Section 84-1411 of the Nebraska statutes, notice of this meeting was given on April 30th, 2021. The meeting will convene at 6:30 p.m., and visitors may obtain a request to be heard form from staff for any presentation they may have for the meeting. In accordance with policy, the request to be heard forms must be submitted to the Secretary within the first 5 minutes of the board meeting in order to be heard at this meeting. Agenda items are subject to reordering at the discretion of the board president. Please attend the entire meeting to ensure you're able to hear any discussion.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Love is.
Pursuant to Section 84-1411 of the Nebraska statutes, the next regular meeting of the Board of Education of Douglas County School District 0001 and the Board of Educational Service Unit Number 19 will be held on Monday, May 17th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. in the Board Meeting Room of the Teacher Administrative Center, 3215 Cumming Street. The agenda will be kept current and available for public inspection in the Office of the Secretary of the Board of Education at the Administrative Building during regular working hours. Pursuant to Section 84-1412 of the Nebraska statutes, the public is hereby informed that a current copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is posted in the Board Meeting Room on the north wall. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. President Erdenberger will lead us in the OPS vision and mission statement.
The vision: every student, every day, prepared for success. The mission: to prepare all students for success in college, career, and life.
Mr. Snow did notify us that he will be running a little bit late today. Roll call, Mr. Ray.
Cassidy,
Here.
Erdenberger,
Here.
Head,
Here.
Holman,
Present.
Cracky,
Here.
Smith,
Here.
Snipes,
Present.
Snow, Thielen.
Here.
8 present.
Okay, and is there a motion to excuse Mr. Snow?
So moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Thielen and seconded by Ms. Crack. Any discussion? Mr. Ray, roll call.
Thielen,
Aye.
Cassidy,
Aye.
Erdenberger,
Aye.
Head,
Aye.
Holman,
Aye.
Cracky, Smith,
Aye.
Snipes.
Aye.
8 aye.
Motion carries. Next, we have School Spotlight with Mr. Maskell. Good evening.
Good evening, Dr. Holman, Vice President Erdenberger, members of the board, and Superintendent Logan. This evening's OPS Proud Spotlight recognizes Ms. Carrie Palmisano of South High, the 2021-2022 Nebraska English Language Arts Teacher of the Year Teacher of Excellence. The award is sponsored by the Nebraska English Language Arts Council and the National Council Teachers of English.
I was flabbergasted. I really was. I was absolutely stunned and shocked. And I'm very honored and overwhelmed by that recognition. I initiated a book project and we distributed 1,500 bags to families of books and games and art supplies and science kit. What started as a let's just clean out the boys' bookshelf turned into this beautiful project. I don't doubt that was part of why I was nominated. I mean, that just ended up being an extraordinary undertaking, and my students were very much so a part of that. Every year I have, about 177 students who are my children. They mean a great deal to me, and they've taught me far more than I've ever taught them about English. My students teach me about resilience, and I tell them that doesn't end. When they graduate, they're welcome to connect with me beyond.
Congratulations to Ms. Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Maskell. Moving on to Board and Superintendent Communications. Mr. Roberts.
President Dr. Holman, Vice President Erdenberger, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Logan. The financial statements for the period ended March 31st, 2021 have been finalized and submitted for your review.
Thank you very much. Dr. Logan.
Good evening, President Holman, Vice President Erdenberger, members of the board, those here in attendance, and those watching the live stream at home. This week is Teacher Appreciation Week, a time to celebrate and those who educate, inspire, and equip our young people to push themselves to become the best version of themselves. We are fortunate to have caring staff members who go the extra mile to bring their best to work each day in service to our students and their families. This school year has required unique patience and flexibility. No matter the challenge, our teachers keep pressing on to deliver the promise of public education. If you're looking for some ways to display gratitude to our teachers, here are a handful of ways to consider. Respond to requests from your child's school to support Teacher Appreciation Week activities. Record and send a thank you video to your child's teachers. Send a digital thank you card and or post a social media recognition to your favorite teachers. We are thankful for our teachers, their passion, commitment, and dedications. Happy Teacher Appreciation Week to all. Speaking of celebrating our amazing teachers, congratulations to 2021 Alice Buffett Outstanding Teacher Award winners. This year's group of honorees have created innovative and flexible ways to overcome a myriad of challenges this past school year. This year's recognized and honorees also includes a mother and a daughter, both math teachers. Each spring since 1988, 15 Omaha public school teachers are honored with this coveted award each spring. Parents, students, and coworkers nominate teachers who cultivate a love of learning. And I have one more. Sorry, I thought I had this teed up a little bit quicker. Maybe I do. Also, congratulations to Hannah Croman-Hook, deaf and hard of hearing teacher at Washington. She is the recipient of the NSEA 2021 Early Career Educator Award. This award was open to educators in their first 5 years across the state. Huge congratulations to Hannah. Also to Lee Perez, ESL teacher at Buffett Magnet, who was the recipient of the NSEA Award for Teaching Excellence in 2021. The award was open to all educators across the state, and Mr. Perez was selected. Congratulations to both of those. Next, our high school vaccination clinics are in full swing. Through our partnership with the Douglas County Health Department and One World Community Health Centers, we have offered space for both organizations to host vaccination clinics for members of our community. Details on how to participate have been shared directly with families from their child's school. We encourage all eligible students and staff to consider getting vaccinated as we head into summer when the weather gets warmer and more people are out and about. As we move forward with 3 weeks left in our school year, we are gearing up for our summer of next level learning. We're pleased to share that our families have been very responsive in signing up. A number of our high school students, yay, will earn 1 elective credit working as paid tutors for our elementary and middle school students. These additional summer learning options are the first step in our multi-year approach to addressing unfinished teaching and learning due to the pandemic. The goal is to positively position our students for success when our traditional school year resumes this fall. 2021 commencement ceremonies are upon us. Thank you to our district operations team for leading the organization of our 2021 high school commencement ceremonies. All will be live streamed. This year's celebration will take place in a hybrid format with graduates from our 7 high schools honored and recognized in person at Baxter Arena. As graduation draws closer, specific details will be shared with families. They will come directly from the high schools and will include information on the health and safety guidelines that must be followed inside the arena. Congratulations are in order for the McMillan Middle School Science Olympiad team for taking first place in the Nebraska State Science Olympiad. The team will represent Nebraska at the national tournament later this year. We're really super proud of them. The winners of the 2021 African American History Challenge hosted by the 100 Black Men of Omaha. Morton Middle School earned first place in the middle school division, and yay, and Northwest High earned first place in the high school division. Congratulations to both those teams. The students who earned recognition at the 86th Annual Nebraska Junior Academy of Sciences State Science Fair. Omaha Public Schools Board of Education President Dr. Shyvana Holman for earning the Alumni Award for Excellence in Public Service from the University of Nebraska at Omaha College of Public Affairs and Community Service. Omaha North High School's AP Chemistry students for taking first place at the Creighton University Virtual Chemistry Field Day. Kate Nicholson of Wakanda Elementary for receiving the Hope Award from the Kids Can Community Center of Omaha. Hita Dirtapa for earning recognition in the Omaha Bar Association's 2021 Law Day Essay Contest. All 267 of our seniors who were awarded the Susan T. Buffett Scholarship Scholarships are awarded on a competitive basis to two first-time freshmen entering college who live in Nebraska. Graduates from a Nebraska high school with plans to attend a Nebraska public college, and congratulations to all Omaha Public High School staff who were recognized as Cox Education Heroes. Thank you, thank you, thank you to our staff and to our students for continuing to make sure we shine in and outside of the classroom. Each of you make us OPS proud. This concludes my remarks for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Logan. Moving on to board members, Mrs. Cassidy.
Thank you, President Holman. I just wanted to take a quick moment. It's so many fun things are happening, and Dr. Logan just mentioned Alice Buffett Awards with spring. It just so many good things are happening in our district, and Teacher Appreciation Week, so kudos to all the teachers. But recently, I started thinking about our student athletes, and I just want to take a moment to acknowledge our spring athletes. Since we did not get, all of our sports in this year, we've pretty much missed out on our fall sports. But I've been thinking about the spring athletes. I've been seeing on Twitter all the different senior nights for some of those athletes. I went to a senior baseball night for Omaha South, and it was really a nice night, and it was fun to see the seniors get recognized. So just wanted to take a moment to congratulate all the athletes, especially the seniors. It's been a tough season for all of our athletes this year that got to participate in sports. They did well adhering to all of our COVID protocols and wearing masks and social distancing. So just congratulations to all of them. And then that also made me think about prom. Just wanted to wish all the seniors a fun, safe, and memorable time at prom coming up. I think most of the proms start this coming weekend, I believe. Or have I missed? Okay, I was going to say I might have missed a few. That's right, Central was this week. I did see that. So just wanted to wish all those seniors. It's been a long road, but I'm very happy that we were able to extend a prom, and thanks to the district and of course, Dr. Logan for making that happen. So just kind of a senior shout out to teachers and seniors tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cassidy. Ms. Snipes.
So one of the fun things about the board this year is we have these mentor-mentee relationships, and I have the pleasure of having Vice President Erdenberger as my mentee, but she has also been a mentor. And so I'm going to pull from her tonight and talk about one of the items on the consent agenda. And that is item I-17, which is the approval of the Memorandum of Understanding between the district and the Southside Redevelopment Corporation to collaborate in the development of a program to enhance school programming at Indian Hill Elementary as part of the revitalization of the Southside Terrace Indian Hill neighborhood. Well, I just so happen to be now the Vice President of the Highland South Indian Hill Neighborhood Association. So this item on the agenda tonight is extremely near and dear to my heart because this work is literally happening in my backyard. If I hop my fence, I am in Southside Terrace. As we talk about our mission and preparing children for success, I always stress that community has a part in that. Sometimes I feel things are unfair for OPS a little bit because oftentimes I think the school district is relied upon for a multitude of things, but sometimes our communities aren't strong enough to be the resources that they need to be. So as I read the MOU, I was just very excited. I have been actively involved with Canopy South since these conversations began, and I'm appreciative of it. This is about, like it says, transforming the school into a community hub for lifelong learning and community wellness. And if you happen to visit that neighborhood, you will see that it needs that. It needs community wellness. And so the plan is to engage the community, which is needed. And so I just want to say thank you to OPS for being willing to offer the collaborative planning, being willing to solicit information from us, because oftentimes the community is left out of decision making. So I appreciate that from all of us in the neighborhood. And as always, from my position in South Omaha, from my position just in the neighborhood, I am always willing to help and be whatever resource I can be. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Snipes. Ms. Erdenberger?
Thank you, and I have one less thing to talk about, apparently. Good job, Kimra. One of the items I want to draw your attention to is item 1.5, which appears to be a contract for $168,000 for work to be done at Bryan High School. I would just like to draw to your attention to the fact that there was a project that was just completed that came in at under about $166,000. So even though this looks like $168,000, where's it coming from, so on and so forth, I just want to point out that the money is being watched very carefully, and the project preceding this one came in way under budget, which is always a nice thing, and I think it deserves to be drawn to your attention. An exciting step forward is item 1.7, where we are spending $3 million on chairs, desks, and all of the sorts of classroom equipment we will need for our not one, not two, not three, but 5 new schools that are opening up. In addition, I think some of that equipment is going into Lewis and Clark and Monroe. But anyway, so a lot of new chairs and whatnot. Another thing, for those of you that watch the consent agenda carefully and look at it on Friday, you might notice that there are 3 items that are not on there anymore as of tonight. I just want you to know that the procedure is that if there is a board member that has a question or does not feel like they understand completely what the item is, they merely request that it be pulled from the consent agenda. One of those items has been moved to an action item. I believe it's J1C. The other 2 have been pulled permanently for further consideration, and they will show up again, probably on the next board meeting. But just so you know that there is a process by which these items, the only items that end up on the consent agenda are the ones that the board members have already reviewed pretty carefully and believe that they do not require any discussion. Last but not least, in recognition of this being Teacher Appreciation Week, I hope many, if not all of you, had a chance to read the editorial Midland Voice that was written by Ken Bird yesterday in the World Herald. He has 48 years in education, and he pointed out that looking back at the 2020-21 academic year, there were countless ups and downs, unknowns, and sometimes overwhelming uncertainty. In my 48 years in education, I don't recall anything impacting education like the COVID-19 pandemic has. Yet, educators persevered. Teachers found a way to engage students during remote learning, transitioned their lessons from face-to-face to remote format, and then back again, and kept the health and safety of their students at the forefront. I would like to give a shout out to everybody in the district level that helped that be possible, but in the trenches, a big shout out and appreciation for Teacher Appreciation Week for our teachers that have had a grueling year and are looking forward to this summer as much as anybody else is. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Erdenberger. Ms. Cracky?
In that I hope some of the teachers will stick it out with us through the summer school, and that's because they're familiar with the children and what they already need to do. And so if it's held at that school, I hope that those teachers will just help us and help the students, because they weren't with their teacher very much this year. And I know they will all benefit from going to summer school. So again, I'm putting that out there, and someone's going to give us the numbers now of who has, how many have we got signed up for summer school. Do you know the numbers? Does anyone?
They're in the receipt of reports, Ms. Cracky.
The numbers are there?
Yes, in the receipt of reports, yes, ma'am. I can share them with you at the end of the meeting.
I'm sorry, I was all finished.
Are you finished? Okay, I just wanted to make sure I didn't cut you off or anything, okay. I just also want to echo my colleagues and wish all of our wonderful teachers a happy Teachers Appreciation Week. I know that this is a week for joy and excitement and just making sure that we show all of our teachers a lot of love, especially this week. Also, congratulations to all of our Buffett Award winners, and also to both Morton and Northwest, who just both happen to be in my sub-district. I don't know if that means anything or not, but I just like to point that out. Congratulations to you, to both schools. And then also I want to give a personal thank you to Mr. G at Fullerton Magnet Center, who happens to be my daughter's teacher, who has done just a tremendous job this year. And I know I've spoken about him before, but you know, he was not a Buffett Award winner officially, but in my heart and in my mind, he is definitely a Buffett Award winner just for everything that he has done and everything that he continues to do for the children at Fullerton Magnet. So thank you very much, Mr. G. And moving on to public comment. Masks are required to be worn in order to speak during public comment. If you are not wearing a mask will be provided to you at the podium to wear while speaking. We have one speaker who has submitted a request to speak form. The board has adopted policy 8346, which provides public comment for a period of 1 hour. That same policy limits individual speakers to a maximum of 5 minutes. We ask that you respect the time limit. Mr. Ray will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining and when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you are in need of an interpreter, please let Mr. Ray know and one will be provided for you. If the subject of your public comment is related to a particular student or staff member, we ask that you not mention the student or staff member by name and instead provide that information to Mr. Ray. He will assist us into looking into those types of specifics for you. If you do not get an opportunity to speak and would like to submit any written commentary, please provide it to Mr. Ray, and he will make sure that each member of the board gets a copy. As a reminder, we ask that you please spell your name and state your address before beginning your public comment. It is now 6:53 p.m., and our first and only speaker of the night is Mr. Miller. Good evening.
Good evening, President Dr. Holman, Vice President Erdenberger, Superintendent Dr. Logan, and members of the board. My name is Robert Miller. That's R-O-B-E-R-T-M-I-L-L-E-R. I reside at 7301 North 107th Avenue in Omaha, 68122, and I am the president of the OEA. Scott Hayden once said, teachers have 3 loves: love of learning, love of learners, and the love of bringing the first 2 loves together. With this week being Teacher Appreciation Week, I wanted to shine the spotlight on the teachers of the Omaha Public Schools. OPS is lucky enough to have the dedicated teachers who have worked tirelessly to address the many challenges and opportunities they found themselves in this year. It was not easy, but they continued to work to bring the first 2 loves together. If you visit a classroom lately, it may have looked differently, but one thing remained the same. Learning was taking place, and students were at the center of all of it. When the district closed the buildings last spring, the world realized just how important and what teachers do each and every day. There were many comments that could be heard about how teachers are, how hard they worked over their career. Some of the comments that were said was, my own kids don't even listen. Or my favorite, I had to call this child's parent, but I'm the parent and I don't know what to say to this teacher. And also that teachers don't get paid enough and they deserve more. I couldn't agree with that one. Teachers did not go into the field of education to get rich monetarily, but to be a part of the change the world needs. They do the job for the outcome, leaving their thumbprints on the many students that are considered theirs for only just 1 year. Teachers know the amount of work and energy it took, but it was the love of the learning and the love of their students that continue to keep them present. The 4,000 educators of OPS may not all receive the public accolades they deserve of acknowledgement of the small wins they assisted with, but this week, we need to let all teachers feel appreciated, valued, and most importantly, loved. If you're a parent, community partner, or a supporter of public education, share some love on teachers They deserve it after a year they've had. Small notes go a long way. To all those teachers in the room and watching at home, OEA thanks you from the bottom of our hearts for being present for our students and making a difference in their lives. And as a father of two, I am truly blessed to know that my children were taught by phenomenal educators in the OPS district. I know it's not easy, but your hard work is noticed every day. You are valued and you are appreciated by many. So those of you who are out there, share some love to a teacher. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And if we don't mind, can we just all give a round of applause for all of our teachers and recognize them? We certainly appreciate you all very, very much. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda that is before us.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Snipes. and
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Smith. Any abstentions?
Yes, I have an abstention.
Okay,
I am abstaining from, hang on, I think it's
Claims report C,
I-11,
believe.
Claim
Okay.
C. Yes, I was just getting the official I.11.
Perfect.
Claim C this evening,
All
please.
right, Mrs. Cassidy will
Thank
be
you.
abstaining from Claims Report C. Mr. Ray, roll call, please.
Cassidy,
Aye.
Erdenberger,
Aye.
Head,
Aye.
Holman,
Aye.
Cracky,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Snipes,
Aye.
Thielen.
Aye.
8 ayes.
Motion carries. Moving on to action items. Item J1A, approval of the report of the Legislative Committee, including recommended legislative positions. Mr. Head?
Yeah, thank you, President Dr. Holman. We don't have any new legislative positions that we're asking the board to take again today, but I do have a quick update on what's been going on, as the legislature has been pretty busy the last 2 weeks. Today was a recess day, but tomorrow is day 71 of the 90-day session. The budget was passed. The governor signed all the bills with no vetoes. And the Forecasting Economic Advisory Board met last week, and they increased the revenue forecast by $90 million for fiscal year 2021, which leaves about $38 million in extra money for the legislature to spend this year if they so choose. A quick OSERS update. The bill was scheduled to be on the floor on April 23rd. They didn't get to it, unfortunately, so we're hoping it will be up end of this week. Other items of note, LB 396, the Farm to School program that we supported, was advanced. LB 644, which is a joint property tax hearing bill, we opposed that. That also advanced and is likely to pass this week or next, I'd imagine. We'll see. All right. And then outside of that, other bills to note, LB 408 and 364, we opposed both. They both failed to advance last week. And then tomorrow will be a fairly big day for us. LB 454 and 132, which we both opposed, are both up next week, or tomorrow, I apologize.
Thank you so much, Mr. Head, for the information. Moving on now to J1B, approval of OPS Middle School Science Book adoption. And we have Mr. Chris Shaben, Mr. Dan Sitzman, and Ms. Jennifer Ryan also presenting with us. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. Dan, will you mind helping me out here just a little bit? Oh, Mr. Ray. Mr. Ray. Thank you for waiting for us there. Good evening, Dr. Holman, President Dr. Holman, Dr. Logan, and members of the board. My name is Dr. Chris Shaben, and I'm here, I'm the secondary teaching and learning consultant. I'm here this evening with an action item for your consideration to adopt the CK12 as a textbook for middle school science pursuant to Board Policy 6121, Curriculum Review Cycle. and the strategic plan, specifically strategic priority number 1, academics. Omaha Public Schools is fortunate to be in a position to adopt this digital text thanks to this board and leadership who worked to implement the one-to-one iPad initiative. This allowed OPS for the first time to be confident that we would have equitable access to a digital textbook. Oops, excuse me. Curriculum Instruction Support recommends the adoption of the CK12 Digital Flexbook for middle school science beginning in the 2021-2022 school year. CK12 is a digital text to support our instruction and learning of Nebraska's college and career-ready standards for science. CK12 is an open education resource. That means that it's one that's in public domain or is licensed in a manner that provides everyone with free and perpetual permission for use. With grant support over the past 5 years, we have had teachers create three-dimensional phenomena-based units of study directly aligned to Nebraska's college and career-ready standards for science. These include daily engaging lesson plans and assessments. In these units, students are encouraged to make sense by gathering evidence to make claims and support those claims with scientific and engineering reasoning. Thus, in OPS, students are involved in active engagement of doing science. The 3 dimensions of the standards that I'm talking about are shown in the rope graphic on the left side of the screen right now. You can see the words science and engineering practices, cross-cutting concepts, and disciplinary core ideas that are intertwined like a strong piece of rope. On the screen now, to the right of the rope, you can see that the 3 dimensions of the standards can also be thought of as what students do, what students know, and how students think. Dan Sitzman, our science instructional coach, and Jennifer Ryan, OPS science lead teacher, are here to highlight a few of the features of this digital resource, CK12 Flexbooks, that will help our students meet the rigorous college and career-ready standards for science. Dan and Jen?
Good evening. We provided you guys with a PDF version in case you guys wanted to see it, but tonight we're going to do a brief overview of the features that allow the CK12 Flexbook to support OPS students, teachers, and parents. For example, tonight we have accessed the current supplemental text for 6th grade science. Right away, one can see that this book is OPS specific with our own title, logo, and photo on the cover. In the table of contents, the text is arranged to align with the OPS pacing guide and as well as having the Nebraska College and Career Ready Standards for Science indicated. For our demonstration tonight, we will click on the 2nd quarter unit weather, and this is identified by the Nebraska College and Career Ready Standard for Science 6.12.A and D. And more specifically, we're going to look at pressure and density of the atmosphere. As you can see, this text is organized very similarly to a traditional textbook with common text features and structures, such as having key terms in bold font. In CK12, the terms are linked so students can access additional supports, including definitions, videos, and simulations. We clicked on the term weight. You can see the term at the top and the definition below it. Along with the definition, you can also see that there's extra simulations, videos, and other practices that students could access for support or just because they're curious about the topic. In CK12, a student can annotate and add their own notes because of the digital format. In this view, you can see that a student has already taken notes. Now they're going to highlight the text and make a note in their own words to better connect to the content. These notes can then be accessed at a later time by the student. Our current textbook was available in English and Spanish. To help meet the needs of our over 100 languages spoken in our district, CK12 has the ability to change the text with Google Translate with the click of a button. We also know that many of our students benefit by using tools on their iPad or in Chrome to have the text read aloud through an immersive reader. Here is a short passage doing just that.
The pressure of the air decreases with altitude. The pressure of the air decreases with altitude.
As we mentioned before, one of the benefits is the ability for OPS to customize each Flexbook. In this section, we have added content-specific connections with texts, photos, and videos that OPS students have access to in our current curriculum. This is a video from one of our many HAB launches, or high altitude balloon launches. Another feature of CK12 Flexbooks is how students can access their understanding. There are traditional style questions at the end of each section. Unlike traditional textbooks, CK12 has adaptive practice questions for students to answer. These practice questions are where students are challenged at the level to which they respond to the questions. Typically, there are 10 questions that students need to answer correctly before completing the practice. As the student progresses through a practice set, they can see a report which helps them to understand the types of questions that they have mastered, are proficient in, or are still in the developing phase of their personal learning. We can also see that the report provides students with a list of questions that they attempted. This allows the students to compare their first response with the correct response. And finally, on the teacher side, CK12 provides data to summarize individual students' levels of understanding, so a teacher can provide additional support or extensions to lessons. This includes a traditional gradebook summary, as well as data displayed like this, where a teacher can quickly identify which students are at what levels of understanding. This concludes our demonstration, and we will now turn back to Dr. Shyvana for the conclusion of the presentation.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Jennifer. This slide summarizes the features available in CK12 digital Flexbooks. Dan and Jen just demonstrated much of this already. I would like to highlight the last two bullets on this slide. Students and parents can access CK12 Flexbooks from any device. As all of us work together to help our students learn science, we will now have a completely accessible product. We also have the ability to print the PDF as we apply modifications to reach all of our students. There are printed copies here tonight of the digital resource, and more can be printed for students as needed. This slide shows the main steps that we took to arrive at the recommendation to adopt CK12 Flexbooks for middle school science. Starting to the left, we can see that we started looking at exploring those resources in the 2019-2020 school year. As the pandemic settled in, we were able to utilize CK12 textbooks as a supplemental resource. You can see that we continued to analyze the CK12 Flexbooks consistent with the curriculum development cycle. Those steps included field testing the resource in OPS middle school science classrooms, completing a bias review, and hosting a community review. We worked with district communications and the diversity and equity department to invite and initiate those working groups. The outcome revealed that CK12 is the most fully developed product aligned to Nebraska College and Career Ready standards for science and allows customizations and updates. Here are some of the comments that came from the review process. A field test student said, "I like CK12. I was able to access it faster and even provided me a video that helped me understand better." A field test teacher said, "Overall, I prefer the use of the CK12. It's easier for the teacher to navigate and it's easy for students to navigate." And finally, during a community review, one parent said, "So this is a free resource that approximates everything in a purchased textbook. So we're doing this for quality, customization, and cost." I flipped too far. CK12 does not charge for their materials and online access. OPS estimated cost to implement this product include curriculum writing and professional development. Curriculum instruction and support will fund talented OPS science teachers for this curriculum writing and updating to implement and maintain the CK12 digital Flexbooks. At this time, we request the approval to adopt CK12 Flexbooks for OPS middle school science students and teachers beginning in the 2021-2022 school year.
Thank you so much for the presentation, Dr. Shaden.
Yes.
This makes me excited. It makes me want to get back in the classroom and teach fourth grade again. Any questions from board members? Mr. Thielen?
Thank you. I agree. This is really exciting. It looks like there's lots of opportunity here. I wonder, is the content accessible even without an internet connection? Obviously, some of the enhanced features and the links to outside sources would need internet. But if you are leaving home and you've got spotty access, can you still read the basic text?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Thielen. So in addition to like the book that you have printed there, you can print it section by section. Copyright is such that we have no problem doing that. It's free and open. The other thing to note, like looking at my own students who are at Lewis and Clark, my children, and they come home without their textbook, but they usually have their iPad. And that text will be available as a PDF on that iPad too. Perfect. You wouldn't need the internet even.
Excellent.
So multiple ways.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Can we make adaptions during the school year? Say some of the kids get behind or are advanced? Are there some things that we can change kind of freely?
Can I clarify the question? Are you asking, can we speed up or slow down in the school year?
Speed up, slow down, but maybe there's a new, I don't know, a new format of teaching or a new subject matter that our kids are really excited about. Can we add that to this textbook?
So maybe like if Pluto becomes a planet again?
There we go. There we go. Yeah.
You know what? We can do that. We can put that in. We would do that as a district and roll that out for our teachers. Yeah.
Vice President Erdenberger?
Hi, this is very exciting, and I'm equally excited that I'm not in the classroom because this old dog doesn't learn new tricks all that easily, which brings me to the question of how are our incoming teachers prepared to do this? And I don't just mean on the couple of days before school starts, but are they working with, and specifically, would they have access to practice teaching skills with this material? If we get most of our teachers from UNO, do we make this available to UNO teachers so they can play around with it before they show up in our classroom?
Thank you, Ms. Erdenberger. You're probably of the ilk of me and several other folks that remember the book room at UNO that had these shelves and stacks of different teachers' manuals, and they were sorely outdated then. The reality is teachers, anyone right now, can use that link that was in even the rationale provided to you, or just go on ck12.org and search for Omaha Public Schools textbook, and it'll pop up. There will be no restrictions, and that's a benefit to us because there's no cost, right? So you're not paying for a subscription. Yeah.
Do you happen to know if this is something that our teachers, well, maybe I'll ask Shyvana later, whether our teachers' colleges are in fact practicing with this book or other books like it?
The other,
just curious.
If I may respond to the first part of your comment, it wasn't really a question, but when we worked with teachers and looked at this product, they found it super easy, and we tried to reflect that in the comment we had. It was very natural. Some of the stuff that we have now, because it's for pay, it's kind of protected and you need this login for that and this login for that. It's not the case with this one. It's very open and very easy. Our teachers found it easy to navigate. But we will do that upfront work in the
Just
fall,
curious.
for sure.
I do have one other question, though, and you referred to the fact, and you showed on your timeline, that there was field testing, there was bias review, there was community review, so on and so forth. And then you listed 3 really positive comments. I guess
Yeah.
I would be very interested in knowing what kind of pushback or negative or adaptations you had to make, adaptations you had to make because of things that were identified, and we were able to fix them. So what kinds of things did we fix during the course of this process?
So I want to start with acknowledging the CDC cycle, the curriculum development cycle, is a great one. It was difficult to pull off in a pandemic, I'll tell you that for
Good point.
sure.
Good
Like
point.
having those review meetings. There weren't really any negative comments coming out of the review process that stand out. I'll give you an example of one. One comment was some of the products we've had in the past for teaching will grade level reading. This one's set at grade level, so there's what we call Lexile level, and it just means that the text is delivered at the level the students are supposed to be reading at. And they don't toggle. You saw us toggle into different languages. This product does not toggle into lower Lexiles. What it does do, so that was a criticism, but I would say right along with that criticism, what it does do is has all those supports that a teacher would need, like the videos, the PLICs, the adaptive practice, to help that student gain access to that sort of really hard level reading. So we're exposing students to the right level of reading, which is really cool, but then we give them the supports to get there.
So for the most part, you didn't have to respond to any.
No, but if we do, it is customizable. And so we'll, right now what you're looking at is the supplemental version we utilized during the pandemic. We of course want to add things to that, like, you know, the bird migration, the sandhills crane migration or something is a good example. That's really Nebraska specific. We want to put that in, and so we can do that. So we'd have opportunity. If we find something, we would absolutely have opportunity to do that.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Head?
Yeah, thank you, President Dr. Holman, and thank you for the presentation. I really like this. I like how it's interactive, forward-thinking. I guess going back to Mr. Thielen's question about access, so does a student just go online and log into the book, or how does that work?
So that's an intuitive question. Yes, right now you can, and that's how we're using it right now, is just a web access product, or you can download that as a PDF, that version. There are, and we had one bullet about being able to integrate into other district systems. We could add that to different systems over time, but right now it's completely out there and accessible, and it will always continue to be. But we might be able to put it into other things as we go forward.
Okay, and I think you pretty much answered my second question, which so it sounds like a student can download, you know, chapter by chapter, lesson by lesson, so that if they don't have connectivity, they can still have access to the material. Then.
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
100%.
And then I guess being a digital or online based. And we all kind of know that the internet's unpredictable. Say, you know, K12 gets a DNS attack and they're down for a couple days or something like that. What's our backup plan to make sure that students still have access to curriculum?
So we have the printed copies that you have are a PDF that live on one of our computers, and we'd be able to use that in the interim should something break like that.
Okay.
And that does happen. So, yep, we would just have it housed. And because of the license, because of the nature of it, we don't have to get special permissions or on copyright for any of that. It's out there. Go ahead and use it. So.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Ms. Cassidy?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. What an exciting and textbook. I mean, just looks so versatile. It's I think something that kids are going to definitely, well, hopefully they're going to gravitate towards, and looks very user-friendly. My two quick questions. The slide that you showed, and I apologize that my slide is not coming up, but you showed one of the slides on teachers, and it showed their grade books, a quick snippet of their grade book. Do we anticipate that this CK system textbook adoption, will it ease time for teachers? Will it change how they teach this? I mean, I guess will it free up and make things a little bit simpler for them?
So the slide that we showed was just a snippet of how students were performing on a skill level on one axis and the content on the other.
So it's not per se their grade. I mean,
No.
I just kind of wondered, are they able to change?
Stick with our, yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if that would change how we grade or anything like that.
No, no, we're not intending to grade.
Okay.
We really like to stick in our own lane here, and I think that's the district grading practices
Okay.
are.
I didn't know if
set.
that was a piece that
Yeah.
tied into how we grade or anything. Okay.
Well, there is one piece, and I don't know if you caught it, but the adaptive practice has different levels of what the students are understanding. So it's not the student missed 4 out of 10. It's which 4 questions and how hard were those questions.
Okay.
And so that's a really neat feature that's a real nice dovetail to our current grading system.
Nice. And you somewhat answered the second question that I have. You have up there the 4,500 annually to update.
Yep.
Is that per se somewhat like Mr. Smith's question, if things need to be changed and if like teachers do some cool experiment and videotape it, you can possibly adopt that into the
Yep.
next update?
Yes.
Is that so that's a yearly update, things will be looked at?
Yes, and that's just an estimate, and that would be paying for teachers' time. So our own awesome teachers, if they do another high-altitude balloon launch and they want to put it in.
Right, that's kind of what I was thinking,
Yep.
if they do some outrageous new experiment that
Yeah,
warrants being put in the textbook. That's really cool.
yes.
What a cool feature.
Yeah,
Okay,
we're excited for it.
thank you.
Mrs. Cracky?
I think it's wonderful looking at it, the Flexbook. Are we going to be able to have any of these in the classroom?
Yes, as
These-
needed.
Each child will be able to have one. Now, if a teacher teaches 7th grade and the same thing in so many different classes, do they each have their own personal book, or is it staying in the classroom?
So the go-to would actually be, since we have the devices, the iPads, the go-to would be to use that in a digital format, because that's how the annotation works. That's how I keep track of my own notes as a student, so to speak. So that would be the go-to. The digital printout is more for those days where the internet failed, the iPads don't turn on, and that type of thing.
But see, I love holding it. I love
Yes.
looking at it. I like to have it as opposed to the screen. So much better. What in the world would the cost be if we could purchase what we need?
So there would be no cost for the purchase. It would just be our printing costs. And the books you're looking at today were printed by our own P&P
Here
department.
in the
Yes.
building?
Yes.
So what did it cost, what does one of them do you think cost? Just one?
To be 100% honest, I can get that information to you. I don't know.
Anybody can
It's-
break that down? How many did we have printed, and what was the cost to do that? And is there a possibility that we can put this in the hands of students?
Well, a couple of things. One, we are helping our students transition to using the digital resource. Remember that we're preparing students to go to their next opportunity in post-secondary. When we think about a portrait of a grad, and they're going to have to operate in a digital environment. We wanted to make sure that you could see that if we needed to print, because we have children that may have special accommodations. Internet access is essential for all of our children in being able to not just use this resources, but a lot of the other resources that we have and will continue to develop as we move forward, because that is the way that things are being prepared now. Nothing is being prepared now for children to just have books that, unfortunately, that that they can hold. We have to be prepared for the world that they're going to live in, which is digital books and digital access to books.
However, science was not my best thing. It was my worst thing. And looking at this made me really like it. Going up and down the screen is not going to make me like it to the same extent. I can look in the contents in front. I can go back and forth. For me, I would like to have that. So if I was going to college and the bookstore had the books to still get, I would still be a book person. And I understand about the internet. Not everyone likes going up and down. They'd rather just sit somewhere and read something. So I'm still trying to, I'm expressing my opinion on that. And I don't know if there are others out there that would feel that same way, teachers or students. Now, teachers have access to one of these, I would assume. Each teacher that teaches this would have access to this? Yes or no?
Our current plans, no. We would, and we lose some of the. It is a transition to be 100% honest. It's a transition to go to digital, but they lose some abilities to go deeper into content. And so when Jen showed like the spot where the student looked at weight was the example, and she could go into the video or the clicks or the demonstrations. A student could do that on herself or his own self or his own time, go into that and go very deeply into that content. As it's printed, it comes out in such a long form that it might be, the Plex might be 17 pages away. And so.
And that is not what I would want.
Yes.
I don't want confusion.
Yeah.
You know, I just like any time having the book in my hand.
Understood.
I mean, I read the World Herald. I have it online, but I don't read it online. That's what I'm trying to say. I like just having the material in my hand. And in math books, is that going to be the same? Are we going to do our math things all on the screen? Our English things, everything is going to be on screen? Is that what we're proposing that's going to be occurring for us?
I do a real good job of staying in my lane. And this is just for science. And actually science is a good spot to start, I would say. Melissa, if you have something, by all means. I think science is a perfect spot to start because one of the slides we had says, what does science already have? We have really good curriculum units that have been written by our teachers, and we have those awesome experiences. The text in science is a support. And so as this is our first step into the digital resource, we'll be able to learn from science and what we do. But there were other pieces to that question. Thank you.
So we have a curriculum development cycle that we go through, and last year we did the ELA one for our elementary students, and we did an RFP with that particular adoption. We did have some OERs come back as part of that RFP, but we did not end up going with one because we choose the best product based off of our curriculum development cycle. This is the first open educational resource that we are asking the Board of Education to approve. We feel that it is the best product and that it will work very well for our middle school science. So as we move forward with the curriculum development cycles in different subject areas, we would want to look at open educational resources, but also all products, and go through the actual cycle to determine the best products to bring to you to ask your permission for approval.
I guess I'm going back to, I always taught out of 3 math books, 3 language books, because none of them had everything in it that they needed to learn. So, I mean, this is one book and there won't be 2 or 3 of these. I mean, I'm just pointing out how it was. I didn't have 3 science books. I had a couple social studies, so thank you for showing. And the screen looks great. I mean, it's really very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Ms. Snipes, did you have a comment or
Just
question?
very quickly, and Nancy, I understand. I read a physical paper myself. I also understand the need to transition because it's a digital age. I would just say that when it comes to sometimes if someone needs something printed, just being as supportive as we can of families who may not have a printer at home or something like that. So.
Yeah, the expectation would be that if a student has needs an accommodation and needs a printed copy, that would be something that would be provided. So that's a really good point. We have students who would need, well, if they're on the screen, they can automatically make the font larger, but we have a lot of students that we have to print materials in much larger font, and all sorts of kids who just really need tactile. They need to feel the book, or they need to feel so we'd make those accommodations as we need to, which we make now. Another example of something that the board approved, actually, which is really an open ed resource as well, is Khan Academy. We are using Khan Academy. Khan has a has a version that is different from the one that you just go on and download. So we've been using aspects of that. In that case, that's the supplemental resource that is an open education resource that students have been using for quite some time. So there are many versions, and we have a Khan is available in our schools for 6 through 12.
And I remember being at a convention when that was presented to us a long, long time ago. It was really a great presentation. So I'm glad that we have the ability to access that.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve the Omaha Public Schools Middle School Science Textbook adoption.
So moved.
It's been moved by Vice President Erdeberger.
Second.
Whose voice was that? I'm sorry. And seconded by Mrs. Snipes. Any discussion? Roll call, Mr. Ray.
Erdenberger.
Aye.
Head.
Aye.
Holman.
Aye.
Cracky.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Snipes.
Aye.
Thielen.
Aye.
Cassidy. 8 aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on now to item J1C, approval of contract renewal with T-Mobile USA Inc. for 4G LTE connectivity with T-Mobile for Education Plan for Next Level Learning, summer 2021, and the school year 2021-2022. And we have Mr. Brian Dunn with us this evening. Good evening.
Good evening. Madam President, Vice President Erdenberger, Dr. Logan, members of the board, I am here to answer any questions about the contract renewal.
Mr. Head, do you have some
T-Mobile.
questions or comments that you wanted to share?
Yeah, thank you, President Dr. Holman. So I had asked that this one be pulled off the consent agenda. I just had a couple of questions. I know at the start of the year we heard a lot from students, teachers, families that they were having issues with connectivity. So I guess one of the most important things was I just wanted to make sure that those issues have been resolved before we renew a contract.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I appreciate that. And I can tell you a little bit, just kind of go over back to the beginning of the year as we were deploying the iPads in waves, if you remember or recall. We did see, initially we had 2,000 iPads that were connected to the T-Mobile plan for the summer school program and did not really have any significant issues with connectivity there. But as we started to roll out more and more iPads, we did start to see some issues arise. That's where the value, I guess, of this partnership right now came into play. We had a dedicated engineering team from T-Mobile to support us anytime we called with an issue. They were immediately responded. We did a lot of troubleshooting at the beginning of the year because sometimes what we found is that even though an issue was being reported and suspected that it was maybe a connectivity issue, it wasn't. It was something else related to maybe many different applications being open on the iPad, or maybe you were using those iPads as hotspots at the beginning, or if you recall, because we didn't have devices in the hands of every student, and so some students were still using some of the computers that we had deployed in the previous spring. So we know that they were also sharing that hotspot as a resource for other devices. Then when we did come across some connectivity issues that we couldn't solve, we were able to transition those plans over to a Sprint tower. So we were issued some physical SIM cards, put those in, and then as we saw more and more upgrades take place to tower equipment throughout the Omaha metro area, but also saw some new sites being constructed and deployed, we now are seeing that those plans that we had on a Sprint tower or Sprint SIM, we're migrating them back over to T-Mobile because they have more towers that are commissioned under that merger. So we have seen great response from them. I think that's been the biggest thing for us. I know we had some situations early on where we had some daycares that had some very robust architecture, if you will. And so it was hard to get a signal inside, and they were supporting a lot of different students at the time. They showed up, they put some equipment in on those daycares to help with that signal, that egress signal. So we have been very pleased with them. This program really is Empower Ed 2.0. So they had been doing this similar type of thing pre-pandemic for a lot of different schools to close that homework gap, if you will. I don't think any carrier would say that they anticipated being the full internet service provider for remote learning as we embarked in the pandemic, especially as the applications, a little bit like what you heard today too, you know, video conferencing, some of that bandwidth requirement is pretty hefty. Even though things are optimized, we do the best we can to kind of regulate what we can and make sure that we're not tasking some of the network unnecessarily so that the functionality is still there. But at the same time, we're all troubleshooting. The other value to having that connectivity plan for us, back to the earlier example of the OER and the science resources and the PDFs and the things that sometimes we can use offline, but we use that network a lot to update our apps. So we have a number of apps that take updates. It's just an easy way for us to ensure that those apps are being updated appropriately so they work, they're functional, so when students arrive for class, there's no concern there with an app that has to update so that they can participate in that class session as well. So we've been very happy. I know obviously times have changed because of the pandemic and maybe have forced some new realities about how we do education in a blended learning environment and how we look to the future to ensure that we have the resources that we need for students. And I would think that if we were going to pursue something on a more long-term basis, then we'd want to stop and take another look at how we potentially solve some of that.
All right. Thank you. And then you had mentioned internet service providers too. So is there a reason why, it's my understanding that the original RFP last year was specifically looking at mobile data providers and not physical internet connectivity. But I know at least both of the ISPs in the Omaha area offer a program where they'll run actual high-speed internet to the home, and it's cheaper than what we're paying now. So is there a reason why we looked at just, I guess, mobile connectivity versus, a combination of the two?
I think early on we did do some promoting of those programs that I know some of the providers had offered. I know, the reliability of whether or not families can take advantage of that, whether or not the economic situations can change. Those are some things that were unknowns for us. Looking at a plan that's attached specifically to a device that a student is going to be issued, I think was really the cornerstone of this whole thing, knowing that I have my device, it's for me, it's for my own educational purposes, and if there's, there was internet connectivity that was provided to the house, is there a guarantee that that student's going to get the access that they need? If their situation changes over the course of the year and they have to move, or they have to be, we handled a number of situations where we knew students weren't even living here in the Omaha metro area because the pandemic and the nature of remote learning was forcing them to live with family members outside of the metro area, but they were still being able to receive internet connectivity to that device. So that was really kind of the main cornerstone emphasis of why we want to really ensure that the student's getting what they need.
All right, no, and I appreciate that, and I definitely understand that there's a lot of students that don't have a consistent home that they're returning to. They might switch part of the week with mom, dad, grandma, whatever it is, and so for those students, running internet to the home definitely wouldn't be the best option. So we'd need some sort of a mobile connectivity to backfill. I guess the way that I'm looking at it is just the cost and the product. If we're paying $15 a month per device for a family of 3 kids, that's $45, where we could be providing high-speed internet, which is a higher quality product, for $10. How do we rationalize the extra $30?
Well, I can talk about that. So one of the things that we don't want that we didn't want families to have to do was reveal their circumstances. in terms of, and I heard your earlier remark around other providers saying things that they would do, but the reality between what providers were saying that they would do and was actually being done, there was a disconnect between that. And so there are some programs, and I'll use a program from another provider, I won't say the provider's name, from another city, who had the $9.99 for, and the speeds are really slow. What we were learning is they wouldn't, if families had existing bills, they would not go into those homes. There were so many barriers that were created in the interest on what appeared to be to the public altruistic intentions by some companies, that it really was a barrier. And we did not want to, families continue to experience so many barriers that our goal in terms of providing access was we can't wait until whomever decides they're going to do broadband for everybody. I think it's a great concept, and we'll be excited and support it whenever it comes. In the meantime, while we have thousands of children and their families who need to have internet access just so they can do their work, and probably this is one of those things where we did it during the pandemic, but we probably should have been doing it before. And except we did it in some pockets, like we had a Verizon grant in a couple places. Mr. Dunn's former school was one of them. It's really an issue where if we don't provide this access, kids won't have access. And it's just that there's not any way, majority of our students, 80%, so over 40,000 students are eligible to receive free and reduced meals, which gives us a pretty significant indication that this is a resource that they will need in order to move forward, even if we're in person, every day, which we certainly plan on being to access their new science curriculum or their textbooks, to access Khan Academy if they're in high school. It's not where it may have seemed like an extra a few years ago. It's become fundamental to the way that we need to do business and provide for the children who need us the most in the state of Nebraska. So it is that stark. That's what we learned. We also learned that prior to the pandemic, when we asked families, did they have internet access, we had the majority of our families said they did. But what we learned was they were counting their phone. Well, you may have internet access on your phone, but it is difficult to do Microsoft Teams on your phone when you have to do work, submit work, and that kind of thing. And so this was another way for us to, and the cost is I agree with you, Mr. Head, the cost is the cost of doing business now in the 21st century with students who do not have internet access at home, and tethering it to the home with the providers who said that they would provide internet access did not turn out to be the case for our young people. There were so many barriers that, because we were trying to use that at the beginning of the pandemic, because we didn't have this.
Right.
So we were trying to hook up families, and what we learned was, I know Ms. Utterback in the back there, her team working to try to get those connections, was that it was just a barrier after barrier. We can't do it. Families were just being turned away. They were being turned away nicely, but they were being turned away, and so kids didn't have connectivity. So sorry, Mr. Dunn, but.
No, thank you. I think, and that's, again, eliminating the barriers and not knowing what other barriers might come our way because of the pandemic. And I think that was, again, just the cornerstone of the thinking is just what can we do that we know can at least eliminate that barrier of connectivity and the device. And I think back, we're about a year away from, I think, a couple special board meetings where we approved the iPads and then we approved the connectivity plan. And I think back then, and knowing what I know now, that there's still some districts that haven't received devices that they ordered last summer, and that's not, you don't say that in spite of other districts because you wish that wouldn't have happened, but because of the quick action of the Board of Education and the members at the time, and just the foresight and seeing that we're going to, run into some potential really barriers that we did not want to have, we were able to get those devices, get them in the hands of students, provide that connectivity, which gave us other options that we could potentially look at in terms of schooling that maybe wouldn't have been there if we wouldn't have had that those resources in place. So we have been very pleased with our partnerships and what have gone on. I don't want to go through it again, but we've been very pleased, and we will always continue to make sure we're doing the best that we can to be good fiscal stewards of whatever resources that we are choosing to deploy to our students and staff.
Any other questions? Vice President Erberger?
Hi, following up on that last point you made about being fiscal stewards, I know even less about this than I did about statistics that we talked about a couple weeks ago, and I know nothing about statistics. But the question I have is, presumably T-Mobile is not the only provider of mobile connectivity, which I guess is the term I'm going to use. Do we have an ongoing, it's a year later, why are we still with T-Mobile? Have we actually put out another RFP, or have we checked to see? Now, I recognize that the program that Mr. Head is describing is a different program and is cheaper for some reason, but not as good an idea for others potentially. But apples to apples, do we know that T-Mobile is the best provider cost-wise and service-wise?
An apples-to-apples comparison can be a little bit difficult in some sense, because you are comparing, whether or not those plans have data caps, whether they don't, whether they tether, the support that goes along with it. We looked at state contract options last year at this time, and for us, that was the best solution fiscally, but also from a support standpoint. And there were some things going into deploying devices that we wanted to make sure that we had the support that we needed so that we could manage to get the devices in the hands of students.
I think what I'm asking is, I know that you did that last year, and it was, everything was happening and it was the best option available. Did we go through that again now that we're renewing?
We didn't go through an RFP. We didn't go through an RFP this time around. I think the decision to continue with the connectivity plan, not knowing again, where when our pandemic officially ends, and knowing last year we needed that to get through the year. We've had a decision that the connectivity plan should continue at least through another year. That's why we're asking for just the 1-year renewal. And then I think going forward, if we officially come out of the pandemic and we're looking at providing connectivity on an ongoing basis, and I think those would be discussions and avenues that we'd want to pursue about what more of a long-term engagement might look like, and what are some possible options to see about pricing.
Is part of your recommendation because we've already established a relationship, we've got a lot of problems solved? Again, I'm not sure what I'm asking,
yes,
but
definitely,
have
for
we
sure.
made progress
and there's
with
just
them?
even, when you talk about the number of devices, and if you were going to make a change, what impact would that have, especially during a time where we're offering summer school for 2 months, and we've had device activations that have happened at different stages. I mean, so there are definitely some logistical things that we would want to know, as that would happen. But I think that is definitely a part of it, like the magnitude of where we're at, but the pricing piece hasn't changed for us. So it's been, makes sense to have a 1-year renewal as opposed to going out and trying to see how, what advantage we could potentially gain for a 1-year renewal on.
So without belaboring it, though, a year from now we'll be in the same situation where we're not going to want to switch horses midstream because we're about to start another summer school session. So if we wanted to, or if it was a good idea, how would we go about changing our provider? I mean, when would it be a good idea? It sounds like it's going to be, and I'm not suggesting we do it right now, but I'm wondering, since we're going to be using these things full-time,
I think if a decision,
year-round.
if a decision like that was to be made, sooner, and we knew next year what our need was going to be, then we would look earlier in the year to start doing something like that. I'd have to work with our, purchasing office and start to put together what a timeline would look like and some of the requirements that we want included in that.
And I only have one other question, and that is that I know at the beginning of the year, well, everything was a mess, so it's not just all about this, but anecdotally, connectivity, I had teachers in parking lots trying to find a spot that their school device would work on, and I mean, it was just, there were a lot, I'm sure you're more aware than I am of all of the issues that were there. Have those issues been solved, or have they just kind of gone away because most of us are in the building now?
I'm not sure I know maybe specifically what you're talking about. I know we've had a number.
Well, I know that there was a lot of troubleshooting that had to occur, and presumably we had a lot of troubleshooting at the beginning of the school year and less now. And is that because we've actually solved problems, or because our service has gotten better, or what would you attribute the fact that we presumably don't have as many issues now as we did at the beginning?
Yeah, I think the onboarding at the beginning of the year was a little challenging, needless to say. You know, we've had schools put in a tremendous effort to have families come up and get a device in a safe way, and there were some instances where that device maybe hadn't been turned on and logged into yet, and so that caused a number of issues, which if that would have happened, we would have a little bit of smoother connectivity with some of those devices. So some of that, yes, is a little bit of that, just the kind of the chaos that was happening at the beginning of the year with everything else going on. I think we've done some things too, just how we manage devices. We went to a new MDM, so that helps us as we become more familiar with that platform, how we can push out different things to the devices using the connectivity plan, but also within our own network, so that things are up to date, they're functioning, they work. Those are all very different components, and there's a lot to them that help with that seamless integration that happen very often on a frequent basis to make sure things are working and where they're at.
So we don't have school secretaries being an adjunct IT department anymore?
I think everybody became an adjunct IT department.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Ms. Erdenberger, yeah, everybody is a adjunct with it. So, but I will say that the team did, I think it was, I'm going to say it was maybe, it was after Thanksgiving, but maybe before the first of the year, we started having the discussions that you're talking about in reference to whether or not we should change, looking at some of the device deployment, where devices, I think I shared with you and Dr. Holman, some of the where devices were being accessed. And so the team really did a really deep dive, and T-Mobile put together a presentation that I believe was in February or maybe late January to kind of look at that. And given the fact that, I mean, we had some vigorous discussions on whether or not we needed to look at that. And the team kind of just, you know, talked about, okay, if we decide to do that, what the lift was going to be. And with the unknowns of what the what the next 12 months or so will be, obviously, you know, hopefully things will continue to get better. The decision was made to move in this direction rather than to go back out to RFP. So it was the document that I shared with you was a part of the team reviewing whether or not we should go back out. So that the document really got into it, and you know, and continue to look at where we have, you know, it's more spotty. So east of 42nd, northeast, you know, is continues to have some challenges, right? But for the most part, those things have, really honestly, to the credit of the team, I mean, there were people that went out to people's homes on the weekends to visit with families to make sure they had connectivity, because families would, you know, send out raise a white flag and was saying, you know, they really were struggling. And then there are some areas of the city where it was just, it's quirky. In the Castellar neighborhood, it's quirky and right around the school. And some, so it was literally about 18 houses where they literally had to go house to house to those 18 houses to make sure that there was, to figure out what the issue was so that those I know you didn't ask for this excruciating detail, but if you ask, but I mean, this is just illustrative of what the team has gone to the lengths they've gone to make sure that every house that they're aware of, that they do everything they can in their power to make sure children have connectivity, and then also to look at maybe for next year, maybe tweaking hours of availability and some things like that, things we've learned. We don't want children at 11 o'clock using, I'm sure they're doing their homework, but on their iPads, and so there are things that the team is thinking about internally to make sure that it's also supportive of what parents need to be able to do in terms of managing the devices on the parent or the family or guardian side.
They'll be able to read their science books at midnight if they.
And thank you for your home visits, apparently.
Yeah, it was an interesting year, to say the least.
Mrs. Cracky?
I'd like to know what was the total cost last year with T-Mobile, and what is the anticipated cost for the coming up year?
Yeah, the cost is the same, so I think the total, the plan per device is $15.84.
What is the total?
$10,720,000, I believe.
And was that the same total as last year?
The same, yeah. It's just a
10
renewal.
million.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Snow?
Thank you, Madam President, and to my colleagues, I'm sorry for being too late to tonight's meeting. I just have 4 quick questions for you, Mr. Dunn. One, I think I brought this up when we first started the RFP process or RFQ process last year, trying to figure out, do we go with T-Mobile or who else is out there, just trying to see who's in the market. Staffing for your department. Now, it seems like we're keeping the contract the same over this last year. Has your department do you have the manpower to continue that, or do you have to increase manpower? I know you won't say anything out of the blue, but I'm just saying that is this a time for us, as we go down this route of continuing this contract, to do like an audit for all of technology, to know that if we could do this in-house, maybe we can cut some of those costs for the next contract, or, how do we maintain this? Because technology, as you know, is always changing. There's always an update. I mean, literally 2 days ago, I couldn't even get on my computer because it told me it was doing a full update for OPS. So what are your thoughts on that? So one, what are your thoughts on staffing for your department with this contract? And two, do you see a need for an audit or on how we're utilizing these devices, but not just us staff, I'm talking about students and families?
Yeah, thank you.
Wait a minute, I'm going to intervene.
Okay.
Mr. Snow, I'm happy to take questions about staffing offline, just because I don't feel Mr. Dunn doesn't have the power to decide his staffing needs, but I'm happy to give a report to the board on what the recommendation is going to be for the next school year, which does include augmenting staff to support the large increase in supporting children at home.
Thank you, Dr. Logan, and I apologize, the correction probably should have just been directed to her. I remember a discussion about a community partner trying to help us with some of our low connectivity spots. Is that still in the works, or is that where?
That partner has come to us and I believe is pursuing stuff outside of the school district. I think that they're looking at broadband more broadly. I think Ms. Snipes might know some of the folks that are working on some of those issues. It's more community-based, not just OPS.
Is there a timeline, you think, for I'm talking about next school year, or no?
I mean, I don't want to speak for the partner, so I don't know how they're planning on moving forward.
Just curious. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Dunn.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion to approve the contract renewal.
Can I just add that I am happy to talk to you, Mark, about that conversation about the connectivity, because there are some other conversations that have been happening.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I will entertain a motion to approve the contract renewal with T-Mobile USA Inc. for 4G LTE connectivity with T-Mobile for education plan for next level learning, summer 2021 and school year 2021-2022 for $10,720,512.
So move.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Smith
Second.
and seconded by, whose voice is that? Mr. Thielen, thank you very much. Any further discussion? Roll call, Mr. Ray?
Head.
No.
Holman.
Aye.
Cracky.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Snipes.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Thielen.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Erdenberger.
Aye.
8 aye.
Motion passes. Moving on to information items, item J2A, recommended code of conduct revisions for 2021-2022 school year, and we have Dr. McFarland here with us this evening. Good evening.
Good evening. President Dr. Holman, Vice President Erdenberger, board members, and Dr. Logan. We come to you tonight to provide information for the first reading of the 2021-22 Student Code of Conduct. The Student Code of Conduct is designed to support disciplinary actions, intervention strategies, and behavior resolutions for students in grades kindergarten through 12 in the Omaha Public Schools. We begin the annual update process each year by convening a Code of Conduct Committee comprised of representatives of principals, elementary, middle school, and high school, our alternative education program directors, administrators, teachers, OEA leadership, curriculum and instruction support, school safety, and other student and community services department members. Much of the input we receive, we have also gathered input from our teachers, students, families, and administrators. And much of the input that we receive come from real situations throughout through the last few school years encountered from implementing the Student Code of Conduct. In April, we had the opportunity to present the draft of the 2021-22 code to the policy committee of the board. Our original changes, lost my place. Our original changes presented to the policy committee are highlighted in your draft in green. Any changes that happened after that presentation are noted in blue. Now, before I begin, I want to make sure that you have all of the documents that I will be referencing this evening. Document number 1 is the 2021-22 code.
McFarland, sorry.
Yes.
Is there supposed to be something on the screen?
Nope.
Okay, just making sure.
Nope, that's okay.
My apologies.
So document 1 is the student code draft. Document 2 is the page-by-page revision summary. And document 3 is our unauthorized tools poster, which is inserted in the code, and I'll refer to that in a little bit. Also, before we begin, I'd like to make a few comments regarding the Code of Conduct to provide context for its purpose and its intended use in our schools. The Student Code of Conduct is one of 3 documents that make up the Student and Family Handbook. The first section of the handbooks contains school-specific information pages, On these pages, our schools list information regarding practices and procedures for students and families in their school community. All schools include a copy of their behavior matrix, in addition to information such as procedures for dropping off and picking up students, for visiting students during the school day, and for meal management. The second portion of the Student and Family Handbook is the District Student Handbook pages. These pages are specific for either elementary, middle school, or high school, depending on the level of environment. These pages include information and procedures about academics, about curriculum, emergency protocols, information about health and nutrition services, communications, and access to records and directory information. The third section of the handbook is our Student Code of Conduct. Our code has a K12 application that is intentionally non-prescriptive because it applies to individuals aged 5 through 21 at varying stages of development from different backgrounds and experiences, often with unique and individual needs. While we refer to it as a code, the Student Code of Conduct the Student Code of Conduct is, I completely lost my place, I'm sorry. Yes, while we refer to it as a code, the purpose of the Student Code of Conduct is to communicate that we have rules and expectations for our learning environments. It is also to communicate that we have responses when there are violations for those expectations. And sometimes those responses rise to the level of administrative intervention. The Student Code of Conduct is also a guideline for our administrators. We use this as a tool to train our administrators to support the teaching and learning approach that we have for addressing behavior. Just as we do with our academic subjects, our goal is not to punish students for their misbehavior. It is to teach and reteach those desired outcomes. Sometimes, as we do when we teach those academic concepts, we identify additional resources and supports to assist in mastery development. Finally, we refer to our Student Code of Conduct as a code. However, it is not intended as an adaptation of the criminal or civil code for children in our schools. It is not intended to codify every potential behavior situation, nor is it all-encompassing or comprehensive. That is why one of the reasons we commit to revising the Student Code of Conduct every year. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with the review. On the front page, page 1 of the code draft, we are recommending to remove the statement from the header and all subsequent pages that the Student Code of Conduct was last amended and readopted by the Board of Education in May of 2019. We also are proposing changing the dates on the code to 2021-22. We are also amending the cover statement under parents, guardians, and students to read, "We ask that you take time, sit down together, and read through these guidelines. Please note the behaviors that may result in an administrative response." Again, we are removing the statement that the Student Code of Conduct was last amended and readopted by the Board of Education on May 20th, 2019. On page 3, under expectations for stakeholders, under the teacher expectation, bullet point number 4, we are adding "and in remote learning environments" to represent where our students are learning. On page 5, the statement in the second paragraph, we are adding again recognition of remote learning environments, and by adding that the code applies to conduct on school grounds and in remote learning environments on OPS-owned computers and digital devices. On page 6, as I highlighted as we started, the code is for our students' grades kindergarten through grade 12. However, we do have early childhood guidance and practices Because our early childhood programs are not universal, we do add guidance for how we address those behavior, recognizing that we in this district prioritize those students that have the greatest need for early childhood education. Our recommended addition here is the last two sentences of the paragraph that says suspension from school is not an appropriate behavior intervention for early childhood students. Please contact our early childhood coordinator for additional resources. On page 7, we have moved a statement concerning the suspension guidelines for students grades kindergarten through grade 6 that were found on page 14. We are moving them to the very front after we talk about early childhood education, and we are deleting the term suspension and replacing it with behavior response. Additionally, we are removing the term practices and replacing it with resolution to reflect the language that we use with our multi-tiered systems of support for behavior. Additionally, this is a new recommendation since we presented to the policy committee. We've received feedback from a board member who suggested that we take the statement that was found on page 19 and we move it here where we talk about the levels of the code of conduct. And so we have moved this statement and added it here, and then added also an additional sentence that says the student code of conduct is a resource for teaching expectations and rules, rationales, and possible consequences for violations. It is designed with 4 levels of violations and 4 levels of administrative response. And the statement that we moved is the note regarding those levels, and that we look at each individual situation and student and incident when we apply the violations and the resolutions. On page 8, under our level 1 violations, our level 1 intervention and response matrix in the table, we have in the far right column, we have deleted mandatory and replaced it with administrative response. And that is because the code of conduct, as I said, is a tool for our administrators. The administrators are responsible for making sure that these responses are carried out. Also on page 10, I have highlighted for you, I'm still on page 9, I have highlighted for you disrespect to adults and others. And the reason I'm highlighting is that because I will refer to it later. It's related to another violation that we are amending. And so I wanted to make sure that you were aware that we do have disrespect to adults and others using words or actions that are impolite, indicate a lack of respect or courtesy. On page 10, just a minor change there. There is a reference to pages 13 and 14, and we've highlighted that so that we make sure to reflect the correct page numbers when we have the final version of the Code of Conduct. On page 11, under our Level 2 Intervention and Response table, second paragraph, under the line, we have deleted suspensions and replaced it with infractions. In the same sentence, we have deleted or a student assistance team, and that is related to the work that we are doing with our multi-tiered systems of support for academics that we will be rolling out in the district with interventions that are designed to really support students academically and behaviorally, and they will not be referred to as student assistance teams. We also delete the word should and changed it to may. Under the bulleted list of interventions for the level 2 violations that they may include, we have removed the bullet for restorative practices, and we have moved it to the end of the list, which you will find on page 12. Where it states that added restorative additional restorative practices that teach desired behaviors and repair the relationship. As we have moved to adding more interventions designed to improve the relationship but also maintain the student in the classroom and identify the needs and supports they've had, we are identifying many of those as restorative practices. Also on page 12, in the intervention and response table, you will again notice the change from mandatory to an administrative response. Under absences for tardiness excessive, we have corrected the policy to policy 5008. The previous policy listed was under the previous policy book. For the level 2 violation table, we have added a new violation. As I said, we look at the practice and application of the code of conduct every year, and we have seen an increase in a number of events, K12, where there have been an exchange or an exposure to bodily fluids. We also referenced that there were situations across the city that have escalated, and so we are recommending adding exposure to bodily fluids, intentionally creating or attempting to create an exposure to bodily fluids, including but not limited to spitting, throwing, wiping, or otherwise dispersing bodily fluids on or to another person for any reason. And as we understand when we talk about the development of our students and our children, that there's one thing when it's a 5th grader who is spitting on somebody, it's another thing when it's a 17-year-old. And so we are making sure that we are responding accordingly. And we have listed this violation with the dots of 2 to 4, 2, 3, and 4, depending again on the details of the incident. Even to the point that we've escalated that law enforcement may be contacted, we have had situations where there have been some incidents of spitting in a teacher's bottle and then watching them drink it and posting it on the internet that was actually identified by law enforcement as an assault. So we want to make sure that we are representing all of those things. Again, taking a teaching and learning approach, those students never once thought about the ramifications of what they were doing long term for the individual that they had targeted. So we try to use that as a teaching moment for those students to think. Again, thinking that their frontal lobes haven't quite developed, and that's part of our role as the educators, is to help them understand. On page 13, we have amended our tobacco violation to include vaping. And so you will see that we have added tobacco and vapor devices used to include students found to be in use of tobacco, vapor devices, or any product that may be used to distribute tobacco in any form, including the use of vapor products, electronic nicotine delivery systems, or alternative nicotine products, while in school building, on school grounds, or at school activities. Now, I referenced before about our level 1 violation about disrespecting others. And the reason is that we are recommending that we remove the violation for verbal or written abuse to staff that is non-threatening. And the indication there is that it is non-threatening. So really what we're talking about is disrespect. And again, it should be disrespect to others, anybody, whether it's a student, whether it's a parent, a community member, or a staff member. So we are recommending removing that violation. Also, on page 13, we are recommending the removal of the violation of youth gang apparel and behaviors. We have several different violations in the code that address inappropriate language, inappropriate clothing, threats, intimidation, and we felt that having one that just talked about youth gang apparel and behaviors was disproportionately targeting some students. And so we want to make sure that we are very clear about the behaviors that we are addressing, and that it is either threats, intimidation, inappropriate language, disrespect. We have other ways to address those behaviors than saying that it's gang related. Furthermore, our previous violation referred to our district having staff. We had a gang interventionist who had information about gang related signs, gang-related behaviors, and we no longer have that position, but we have a collaborative relationship with our Omaha Police Department, who work through our Office of School Safety, and we continue to share that information with our staff. On page 14, you will see where this is where we had previously the statement on our suspension guidelines for students in grades K through 6, and we have moved it from here to the beginning. On page 15, again, the change in our matrix box where we are changing to administrative response. And then also on page 16, we are recommending inclusion of a sexual harassment violation. This is in direct compliance with our Title IX legislation, that we will have sexual harassment, and the language is taken from that guidance. Sexual harassment includes the unwelcome, written, verbal, or physical conduct on the basis of sex, including gender identity and sexual orientation, that creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive school environment. I do believe I had a question from a board member about that language, and I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that it is in compliance with Title IX. Also, depending on that incident, it may merit a level 2, 3, or 4 administrative response, including referring to law enforcement that they may be contacted. However, every incident of sexual harassment will be referred to our Title IX coordinator for investigation and supportive measures for all participants in compliance with Title IX. Also on page 16, we have amended the threats or intimidation violation to comply with our threat assessment guidance, our training, and our evaluation process through our school safety. And we've amended the language to say use or threat of violence, force, intimidation, or similar conduct in a manner that constitutes a substantial interference with school purposes. Threats may include behavior, verbal, written, or any physical action. We also have amended the administrative response to say that a threat assessment must be done by the school staff to be able to assess the level of the threat and tailor then our response. And therefore, we are also removing written or verbal abuse to staff that is threatening because it's been incorporated into the previous violation. On page 18, the level 4 violation matrix table, again, we are amending it to add it as an administrative response. And under arson, this too, I think when I presented to the policy committee, we had found an error there in what our administrative response is, and we have verified with our Office of School Safety that under any incident of arson that is intentional, that we are contacting the fire marshal. Under the violation of selling and distribution and intent to distribute, we have removed the word drugs because the reference is for controlled substance, and we know that part of the feedback that we received last year is that Tylenol is a drug, Midol is a drug, and so aspirin is a drug. And again, we didn't want to necessarily refer to law enforcement on those because again, it's a teaching situation with our students. But anytime it's a controlled substance, alcohol, marijuana, sharing your prescription medicine, that is a referral to law enforcement. Under the violation for sexual assault, we have updated the statute reference in compliance with the revised Nebraska state statute. And finally on that page, under weapon, we have also added the administrative response to conduct a threat assessment. We have had incidents where students have brought pellet guns to school, and we take every incident where a student brings a weapon or something that is not to be had in school that we are assessing to know the level of that threat or that concern, so then again we can tailor our response. On page 19, that is where we have moved the statement on a note regarding the level of response to the beginning of the discussion about the levels of response. On page 20, we have adjusted our glossary definition for disrespect to adults and others to match the language of the level 1 violation, using words or actions that indicate a lack of respect or courtesy. On page 21, we have included the same definition we discussed earlier on our exposure for bodily fluids. On page 23, we have amended the definition of the tobacco violation, again, to reflect the amendment we made earlier. And we have also on page 23 removed the definition for youth gang apparel violation that was previously discussed. On page 24, under the paragraph definition of bullying, we have removed reference to the Due Process School Support Handbook, as that is a resource we no longer use. And we have added, for support with discrimination claims, to please contact the Office of Equity, Diversity, and we have provided the contact information, again, in compliance with Title IX legislation. Under the forms of bullying, we had added also to please consult with our Title IX coordinator for a formal complaint process. We will add that formal complaint process to our district handbook pages, as I said, that go around the code of conduct, depending on the level. And we have added that also to the sexual bullying description. On page 25, it is recommended that we added language regarding the definition of restitution. It used to read that our students had to, if there was damage, they had to pay for the damage. But as we've had the experience with our families, that many of them struggle financially to be able to do that. So we have identified restitution as the act of offering repayment for goods or damage to property, which could include but is not limited to monetary repayment, the offering of a similar item of value, or an agreed upon alternative contribution to the individual or the institution impacted. And I just want to highlight for you that I had an elementary principal who served on our committee who contacted me to let me know that on April Fool's Day, April 1st, a student came in with silly string and sprayed the entire office. And as that principal had to consider the resolution, he spoke with the parent, and together they worked on a restitution, which was the student helped to clean up the mess instead of having the building engineer have to come and do that. And the student had no idea that what took him 10 seconds to do took him about an hour to clean up. We felt that that was much more instructional and had that student understand the potential of behavior by participating in that rather than placing him in a pack room or having him have a different kind of consequence. On page 26, under the description of harassment, we have added support for harassment claims. Please contact the Office of Equity and Diversity, and again, our contact information. And under the definition of harassment, we have removed the first two bullets and moved them under our new violation of sexual harassment, as they do relate directly to sexual harassment. On page 27, we have added the new definition for sexual harassment. And you will see there that we have moved those bullets there. Under theft, we have added language regarding restitution, that we do have that as an option. Again, it's the same as damage to school property, where restitution is the act of offering repayment for goods or damage to property, which could include but is not limited to monetary repayment, the offering of a similar item of value or agreed upon alternative contribution to the individual or the institution impacted. Under threats and intimidation, we have amended the definition to match the violation previously discussed, and we have removed the definition for verbal or written abuse to staff that is threatening. On page 28, under selling, distributing, intent to distribute, or attempting to distribute drugs, alcoholic beverages, or controlled or imitation controlled substances, we have removed the word drugs. We have amended the statement at the end to the definition that we will contact law enforcement. Also on page 29, Under sexual assault, we have amended the state statute to reflect the revised Nebraska statute and added the address and phone number for our Title IX coordinator and the contact information for the office. On page 30, under the definition for weapon other than firearm, we have added the statement, the school will conduct a threat assessment evaluation. It is on page 30 where I would reference that we would insert our unauthorized tools poster in that space there. On page 31, under intervention and response terms, as I said, we are aligning to using more of our multi-tiered systems of support for behavior language and alternatives to school exclusion. So we are adding a description for restorative practices that identifies restorative practices are behavioral interventions, are part of a teaching and learning process to hold students accountable for their actions by providing meaningful opportunities to build social and emotional skills. They are intended to focus on problem solving, repairing harm, and restoring relationships. All participants in the process have a voice and are valued in the resolution so that relationships are built and strengthened in the school community. On page 35, we have added a section for behavior expectations for students in remote learning, and I'll just give you a moment if you want to read through that, and I'm going to grab a drink of water. And these guidelines have been developed by our experience with our students and our teachers and our information technology departments on the experiences that they've had with students, and then also on our students saying to us that these are things that will help them. On page 36, under behavior rules for students receiving district provided transportation, we have changed to behavior expectations. On page 37, we have amended the dress and personal appearance guidance. We kept the first sentence that says your personal appearance is basically a concern of you and your parents or guardians. However, and we have added, a student's appearance should promote positive opportunities for learning and not disrupt the school environment. Students must be fully clothed with a covered torso and shoes. Pictures or words promoting alcohol, drug use, weapons, or other words or images that insult or demean others are not acceptable at school. Other expectations related to age and development of the child should be added in the school information pages depending on the level of the student. I will tell you that much of our conversation about what our students wear in schools is that there were expectations that students cannot wear slippers or curlers in the hair, but then we would have dress down days or dress up days. And we would tell students, you know, come in your bathrobe, come in your slippers. And so really trying to take a look at what are the messages that we are giving our students and working with them as individuals. On page 42, under our students' attendance policy 5008, it starts actually, I believe, on the previous page. This reflects the current adoption of the policy from July of 2020. We print that policy here in its entirety, and so if there are any changes to that policy, we will drop them right in here to the Code of Conduct. But we did have to update from last year. As I said, it was adopted in July, and there was a number 7 that was added, which is referral to restorative practices or service, and that is part of state statute. And then we have also amended our medically excused to reflect policy that says a medical provider's note is required to verify the absence to include a medical appointment, hospitalization, or a long chronic illness, or the school nurse is required to send the student home. Again, this matches the same language of policy 5008. On page 43, under student attendance, this is not part of policy. This is part of our attendance guidance. It says under student attendance, strive for 95. We are bringing it back. Just so you know, next year, we would like to see our students in person 95% of the time. And we are adding in there, in addition to in-person learning, students enrolled in the Omaha Public Schools may also receive instruction at home through remote learning. Guidelines and expectations of the Omaha Public Schools Attendance Policy 5008 remain in effect for students in remote learning environments or programs. And that concludes the proposed revisions of the 2021-22 Student Code of Conduct. Our next steps will be to come back before the board on May 17th with an action item. And I'm prepared for any questions.
Thank you, Dr. McFarland, for the presentation. I just have a couple questions for you. One in particular, in looking at on page 42 regarding the excused medical absence.
Yes.
So when I'm reading it, it says that if you are absent from school because of a medical appointment, so let's just say that my daughter had a medical appointment, I forgot to get a note because she was gone to a doctor's appointment. This is saying that the school nurse has to send her home because she didn't have a note?
No, there are times that our nurses do send a student home and they are considered a medical professional, and so we would count that as medically excused. If a student had a fever, if they had, but this is actually part of policy 5008 that I believe the board is currently reviewing, our 5000 series policies. Okay. And this is in alignment with what had been adopted in July.
And then just for my other questions, I just have some, would it be best for me to possibly just email you the rest of my questions just for the sake of time for tonight? Would that
You
be
certainly may, or you can share them with Mr. Ray, because
Okay.
I have a feeling there may be others.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time and the presentation tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from colleagues? Mr. Snow?
Thank you, Madam President. It's not really a question, but just more of what I would hope that we can have for future presentations. I know we didn't have a PowerPoint, but we do have some families that do watch the board meetings. A lot of families do, and if there's not something that they can see, then I can see how they could get lost and what's going on or how to find it. So probably like even if we don't have a PowerPoint, like something scrolling at the bottom that they can go to and reference, because like most people won't really understand the code of conduct until they start going back to school this fall. So for those who are watching, I would like them to at least have some.
Well, I'm glad, thank you for asking that or for saying that, because we do have it posted as a PDF on the board agenda. But part of what our committee did was also look at how we could, as I've said, this is an administrative tool, but we also want to make sure that we are developing some public presentations, like for our staff. We don't generally, I do training on the Code of Conduct, Student and Community Services does, we do it with our administrators, but we need to have training also with our teachers to make sure that they understand that how it aligns to the work that they're doing in the classroom and supports them. But this really is about the administrative response. At the same time, we would also like to have some public presentations. We've talked even about identifying some of our District Citizens Advisory to gather their input, to have them understand, to bring their concerns and questions to also understand. We really want the Code of Conduct to be a point of discussion and how we can collaborate together, because we are all about caring about the student and the student's development.
I completely agree with you on that. If most students and families know what's in the code, they're less likely to commit a violation in it.
And that's why we do take it as a teaching and learning approach. And we do at the beginning of the year have teaching with our students in the classroom about the Code of Conduct, but we want to look at how we can incorporate that into our advisement program next year at the high school level. I've worked with, had conversations with our school counseling department, who will be taking much of that with how we can break this down and make it more digestible. Because hearing it once, that's not how we teach, and that's not how we address behavior.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Mr. Smith?
I just had a quick question on page 3 under students, the expectations for the students.
Yep, let me get there.
It's really simple.
Sure.
Number 3, attend school daily on time, and then there's an and at the end of that. Is that?
Yes, the and refers to the number 4.
Okay.
So 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay.
And Dr. McFarland, you would like clerical type of things or just minimal
Oh,
questions
that's
like
my
that, just to
teacher.
be- just
Yes, ma'am.
Just email to you. Okay, great.
Please.
Vice President Erdenberger?
Dr. McFarland, thank you. I know that you saw that I have many comments on this, and rather than take everyone's time on it, I will probably be resubmitting them to you, because I do still feel pretty strongly about many of them. But one of my overarching comments is kind of to follow up on what y'all were saying about how this is a document that is not just used in the principal's office, but we have our students sign and acknowledge that they got it so that we can show it to them and say, you got it, you should understand it. You know, I mean, there's a whole process where this is a document that people other than the principal look at and need to be able to understand and follow. And I just have to say, I find it very difficult to follow. And one of the things that I realized only tonight is that you have a separate glossary for each of the levels of 1, 2, 3, and 4. And one of my comments will be, why don't we just have a glossary of all of, so if someone's looking up what is bodily fluid, they don't have to figure out which violation it's in. It's alphabetical, all of the violations at once. I would personally think we should have all of the violations and interventions in the same glossary, but I do understand that there's an argument that could be made for separating them out. But just for starters, I just feel like I'd like to work at not just what's being covered in this, which I know you guys have put a lot of work in, and I really applaud and appreciate the, I think the kinder and gentler approach that we're taking. I think that's really important. But I also think it's equally as important that everybody that uses this can figure out what they're being told they can and can't do. And there's a couple formatting things and the glossary thing that I will be restating as my comments, because I really think it makes it easier for people to follow what they're supposed to be doing. And I know that's your objective,
No,
too.
and I would appreciate that, and if you could be specific with the examples, because I did read your statements.
yeah.
And also that we don't want people to feel like they have to figure this out on their own.
Right.
Again, this is a resource and it is a tool, and we want that collaboration. And so identifying people in the building that they can talk to and say, help me understand this, or even for parents who say, gosh, my administrator called and said that my child had had this type of behavior. What is the potential that I'm going to have as a resolution or as a consequence? Sometimes our parents will say punishment, and we are really trying to move off of punishment and talk about it being about formation.
No, I appreciate that, and I'll work with Mr. Ray to
I appreciate
try and
that. Thank
figure
you.
out how to communicate it better. Thank you.
Mr. Snow?
Just as for Mrs. Ehrenberger, Vice President. There was a time that when I first got on the school board, I had some questions and some concerns about this code of conduct, and I was invited to, it wasn't a committee, but I was invited to be a part of that committee for the next process, and I do believe it did help the district when we were talking about suspensions and things like that, having a board member see the day-to-day and actually getting that stuff in there before, you know, they do that final presentation, and then you're like, how do you? So, just a suggestion. I'm
also operating on I've had to figure stuff out in the handbook when I've had a student in my classroom too. So I'm trying to look. So I know that sometimes it's hard to figure it out. So we'll get it right. Thank you.
Mrs. Cracky?
We talked about the students signing this. Is there a place where we're having the guardians sign it also?
So,
and what do we do about that? Because I know that's very difficult. So are we going to tell them, we will come by your house so you can sign this for us?
So
I mean, that usually that usually has them come to school. I mean, we really need buy-in from the family.
So as I said, the Code of Conduct is one piece that sits in the Student and Family Handbook. And so that is the document that we provide to the families. And when we are talking with our secondary students, yes, we do have instruction. We have instruction with all of our students at the beginning of the school year, kindergarten through 12th grade. Again, developmentally appropriate lessons to review what the expectations are, why we may have those in our schools, and the responses that could happen. Again, in some situations elevating to the level of an administrative intervention. And so our secondary students are the ones who, because it's part of their development, and as we work with them and their families, that they do sign and acknowledge that they have received the rules and that they understand that there are rules and that they're held accountable to those. When it comes to our elementary students, we work with our families, and the parents or guardians acknowledge that they've received it. We also talk about the type of instruction that we've had with the students, and again, developmentally appropriate language. But yes, we want to make sure that our families understand too, that for even our little ones, that we have expectations and that we're going to address those as part of that educational process. So, does that answer your question?
I still think it's important to have the guardians read through it with them, acknowledge the things, talk to them about it. And I don't think just because they're in high school that we are taking it for granted that they've signed it and the parent isn't involved. They've got to have the family input here.
Yes, and that is on the very front, that is parents and students, please sit down together and go through this document. And we certainly have had our homeroom teachers at the high school level and the middle school level define lessons.
I really don't care how much we do at school. If we aren't getting the parent buy-in, I don't like that. I have to have them sign it, whether it's elementary or high school. They have a responsibility for that child just as well as the child has their own responsibility. I don't like that we were going to get them and let them not sign it.
So, Mrs. Cracky, I will take that back, and as we define what we are going, how we're going to roll it out in the fall, we will certainly
Thank you for
put
looking
in
at that.
You bet.
I just think that's important. And they may be with this guardian right now, and if they're a foster child, they may be somewhere else. So then we'd have to add on to that if the people are accepting them in their home as foster children, I would think. So we're all accountable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Don't mean to create more work for you, but should we have something that talks to students who may use their cell phones to record fights and then post those things?
So we do, again, we have expectations for, there are all kinds of policies in our handbook about recording in schools. We do have it as a behavior expectation that they do not. But anymore, if it comes and it's a disruption to the environment, we are addressing that. So it really is on the situation. As I said, this is to give us guidance for how we operate in the schools, and it's not all encompassing, but when there is a situation that creates a disruption, we are addressing that. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you so much, Dr. McFarland, for
Thank you
staying with
very
us
much.
late this night and going over all this information. We appreciate it. Okay.
Mark had a question.
Oh, Mark, I apologize.
No, I can ask it to you later.
Okay, you sure?
Well,
Go
next
ahead.
time when we have when they present, if we can get something on how they do their training with teachers, I think that would help us as well, so we know what our teachers are being trained and what they should know when having to go look in that book and have those interactions. Hearing from Jane and others about really trying to understand it and teach and juggle both, I think is something that, like you said, you have a tool, a great tool, but if you don't know how to utilize that great tool, then it doesn't really mean anything. So.
And I can tell you very specifically about the training we do with administrators. And yes, as I said, from our committee work, we have our next steps, and it is to design some lessons, not lessons, but presentations that would be also available to do at the building level, where we would have the administrators be able to have it at their faculty meeting and use it with their staff. And that is part of why we changed some of it to an administrative response, because teachers thought it was their responsibility to make sure this happened. And ultimately, this is a tool and a resource for our administrators.
Understood. Thank you.
You bet.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you so much. Okay, moving on to item J2B, Student Assignment Plan Committee Update. Mrs. Cassidy.
All right, thank you, President Dr. Holman. Okay, I've got some chicken scratch notes, so I'm going to try to get through this. We covered a lot of ground in our meeting, so I will try to summarize it. We met on the 26th of April, and I do want to acknowledge our committee's changed a little bit. Our committee members now are myself, Mr. Head, Dr. Holman, and Mr. Smith. So they've changed a little bit, I think, since I did our last report. Okay, so basically our meeting on the 26th really focused on the high school plan, because obviously the high school is what the main focus is right now and what we're talking about out in the media and out in the public. So the next meeting we'll talk more about our elementary, but this meeting was a complete focus on our high school rollout. We met with Dr. McFarland, who we obviously just heard from this evening. We met with Dr. McFarland and Casey Hughes in research, and they really the main focus of our meeting was to provide kind of the roadmap that the rollout is going under, all the pieces that have to come to play to implement the student assignment plan. So basically, they went over all of the pieces as far as the timeline, how they work with district staff, such as the different departments that have to play a role into each piece of the process. Our HR department, our CIS department, they talked about getting each of those departments involved so that there's a complete buy-in and everyone can understand and educate all of our different staff members, students, how the rollout plan is going to trickle down from all those departments. We watched a 12-minute PowerPoint presentation. It was just a draft, so this will be something that the board will be shared with the board at a later time. We just got to see the draft form. But basically, the slideshow is a tool that they will be using to educate staff. They will show it to teachers, counselors. They've actually already rolled it out to a few counselors at some of our different high schools, because obviously, if we don't have education, if our counselors and our administrators and our teachers don't understand the process for the boundary changes and the schools, when students come to them and parents come to them wanting to understand where their student will be going to school, it will be chaos. So we need to first educate our schools and all the different staff members involved so that they will be a good resource for our families and our students that are having questions. So we watched a 12-minute slide. It went over every single piece, question and answer, different changes that will be occurring, the dates of those changes, such as when students will be impacted by transportation. All of those pieces were on there, and it was a very good slideshow, so we look forward to that. Then the biggest part that we kind of went through, they walked us through the website basically, which again, I'll shout it out, www.sap.ops.org. Did I have that right? I think that's right. Okay, correct. I typed it out and it just doesn't look right to me. But we went over pieces of that website, and if you folks have not, board members have not utilized the website, please do so. This is what also we're encouraging our families, our staff members, everyone to go to. But we specifically went through the tab, which is Find Your School. We played around a little bit with this tab. If you've not done it yourself, go out and check it out. It basically, families, anyone really, you type your address in and you can choose your level of school. You can choose first grade, sixth grade, ninth grade, and it will literally tell you, it'll show you the breakdown of all the schools that are going to be in your boundary. So very useful tool. Kind of walk us through how to use it. It's very easy, user-friendly. It'll be a great resource for families and students to be able to use. They can look at it now and see the boundaries now. They can also utilize it for where, if they're going to move, or they just want to see where they will be, what schools will be theirs later. If they're afraid that possibly their school can change, it will show them what their school will be once all of our high schools open and our elementaries open. So real time and future time, if you will. I think that's basically it in a nutshell. Like I said, we will go over the elementary rollout in our next meeting, I think, or coming up in the future. But this meeting was primarily to educate us on how our district is educating our staff members overall. I think
Can I
that's
add one
it.
other thing to that?
Yes.
And also with that tool, when Mrs. Cassidy was talking about how it shows you what schools, it also shows you if you get transportation to those schools as well.
That's right. It has a great little icons that show you, all the different schools, and then there's I think it's little buses, if you will, and it shows you if you'll be providing transportation. Thank you. It was a very, we covered a lot of ground. We covered a lot of ground in this meeting, but it was really informative, and it really helped me and made me feel good about how we are going to be educating our staff, all the changes that are going to be occurring so that they are equipped to be able to help our families. Any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Mrs. Cassidy. Okay, we have 3 receipt reports. Item K1, Head Start March Monthly Board Report. Item K2, Final Annual Audit Report of the Douglas County School District 0001, August 31st, 2020. And item K3, Report of Current Enrollment and Staffing for Next Level Learning 2021 for summer programming. Moving on to closed session, Vice President Erdenberger.
I move that the Board of Education go into closed session for the protection of the public interest and for the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of individuals, to discuss with the superintendent, secretary to the board, and legal counsel, real estate and legal advice.
I have a motion to go into closed session by Ms. Erdenberger, and a second.
Second.
By Ms. Snipes. Roll call, Mr. Ray.
Holman,
Aye.
Cracky,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Snipes,
Aye.
Snow,
Aye.
Cassidy,
Aye.
Erdenberger,
Aye.
Head,
Aye.
Thielen. 8 aye.
Motion carries. Let me remind the board that the purpose of a closed session is for the protection of the public interest and for the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of individuals, to discuss with the superintendent, secretary to the board, and legal counsel, real estate and legal advice. Let the record reflect that the board went into closed session at 8:59 p.m. Let the record reflect that the board came out of closed session at 9:36 p.m. And I will entertain a motion that the superintendent be authorized to enter into an agreement subject to approval by the Board of Education for the purchase by the district of real property improvements and easements owned by number 1, Joe and Steve Partnership LLC, and 2, Mitchell Auto Auction LLC as described in the attached legal descriptions, and that the superintendent be further authorized to commence eminent domain proceedings according to law in the County Court of Douglas County, Nebraska, to acquire property if negotiations to purchase the property are not successful.
So move.
Second.
There's been a motion by Mr. Snow and seconded by Mr. Smith. Roll call, Mr. Ray.
Cracky.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Snipes.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Thielen.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Erdenberger.
Aye.
Head.
Aye.
Holman.
Aye.
9 aye.
Motion passes, and let the record reflect that the board meeting adjourned at 9:37 p.m.